Let's start recording. And let me go ahead and share that. So can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I just wanted to, well, for this one, for example, I know that it can be a little confusing what's trying to ask. Well, first off, don't really care too much about those parallel lines or whatever. But when it's asking you for a postulate or a theorem, right? That's basically, what kind of angle is it, right? So is it alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding, vertical, stuff like that, right? So let's look at the first one. It says angle 2 is supplementary to angle 6, right? So we have an angle 2, which is a small angle, and angle 6, which is a large angle, right? So we should know that both of those are supplementary. And what kind of angles are they, right? So let's say that, this is a parallel lines, and then we have the transversal right there, right? Those angles are on the same side of the transversal, so we can say they're the same side, and they're on the inside of the parallel lines. So we can say same side interior would be this first one, right? Remember, reference those notes that I gave you so you guys can sort of see like where they're coming from, right? So same side interior. Okay, it says angle 1 and 3, and remember that little symbol in the middle, it's like an equal sign with a squiggly line. That tells us that they're congruent. So angles 1 and 3 are congruent. Okay. Now with those angles, we can see like they're on the same side of the parallel lines. They're on the same side of the transversal. So that's an example of what we'd call a corresponding angle, right? And this is corresponding because, they're basically the same angle, just in different parts, right? But if they're corresponding, that also means that they are congruent. Okay. Next one says angles 2 and 7. Okay. Now this one is, I guess, a little bit tricky, but we just got to think about it. It says measure of angle 2 and angle 7. Well, it says that they're equal to 180, but I actually don't agree with that. It says measure of angle 2 and measure of angle 7 should be equal to 180. I mean, I don't agree with that because both of those are actually small angles now that I'm looking at it, right? So they're both small angles, and that means that they actually should be congruent. Okay. And if you notice, C and D are sort of basically saying the exact same thing. What is a corresponding angle for angle 2? If anybody can tell me. So what is the same angle?
4.
4, that's right. Angle 4 is a corresponding angle. So if we look at that, those are congruent, right? And we would call those, and I'm just gonna kind of pair the C and D together because they're basically saying the same thing. They're alternate interior because they're on the same, they're on the different sides of the transversal, and they're on the inside of the parallel lines. Okay. And then finally, let's look at angles 1 and 5, which that one I do agree. It says that they are equal to 180, right? We have a large angle and we have a small angle. So they should be equal to 180. They are supplementary. And this is on the same side of the transversal. And they're on the inside, so we can say interior. Okay? All right. So that's for the first part. So probably the first section of the test is going to be on this, recognizing the angles and giving them the names. So make sure, you have those notes ready to reference them, okay? Now let's look at actually finding the measure, right? And so always remember that there's really only two options. They can either be the same or they can be supplementary, right? They can be congruent or supplementary. So it says measure of angle 5 is 120. So what is a measure of angle 1? So measure of angle 5 is 120. So what is a measure of angle 1? So what do you guys think? Are they congruent or supplementary?
Congruent.
They're congruent, yes, because they are corresponding angles, right? They're basically the same angle, just in different parts, right? So if angle 5 is 120, then that means that angle 1 also has to be 120. Okay. All right. Now it asks us measure of angle 7 is 80. And measure of angle 2, what is it? Okay. So this is what we would call alternate exterior, right? They are on opposite sides of the transversal, so they're alternate, and they're on the outside of the parallel lines, so they are exterior, okay? So 2 and 7 are both small angles, so that makes them congruent. Therefore, angle 7 is 80. That means that angle 2 is also 80. Okay, makes sense? Okay, now it's asking us for angle 6 is 65. So what is the measure of angle 4? And again, we have alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles. Basically, we're following sort of the same rule, and you can see that they're two small angles again. So that makes them congruent. So if angle 6 is 65, then angle 4 also 65. Now it's telling you angle 4 and angle 1. So angle 4 and angle 1. What about those? What kind of angles would those be? Congruent or supplementary?
Supplementary.
Yes, they are supplementary, right? We call those, was it linear pairs? There we go. And linear pairs because they are literally two angles that are next to each other, right? So angle 1 and angle 4 are next to each other. Whenever we have a linear pair on a straight line, that should tell us that we have a 180-degree angle, right? So if angle 4 is 68, how do we find the other angle? By subtracting, right? So the other angle should be 112. Okay. So that's the second part, just making sure that we can find the measures of the angles, whether they're congruent or supplementary. Okay. Okay, and then the last part is the one with using algebra. Okay. So we're trying to find here the value of x, right? And we're comparing these two angles. Now, again, we need to decide, are these angles going to be supplementary or are they going to be congruent? What do you guys think? I mean, let's look.
Have you never heard the expression?
What was the question?
We're comparing these two angles, right? So again, we just need to decide, are they congruent or are they supplementary?
Supplementary, right?
Well, they're actually both large angles, right? So if you compare the
Right.
two of them, they
Congruent.
have to be congruent. So if they're congruent, that means that they should equal each other. Okay, and that's how we would set up that equation right there. So solving this equation, we're going to subtract 3x. Then we're going to add 25. We should actually have, I'm going to write it over here, 2x is equal to -5 plus 25 would be positive 20. And our last step there would be to divide. So x is equal to 20 divided by 2, which is 10, which is the answer D. Okay, and well, I'd ask you for the type of angle, but maybe that part isn't too important for this one. It's just about, but they are alternate interior. So they're on opposite sides of the transversal, but they're on the inside of the parallel lines. Okay. And let me just, let's just pretend that both of these were actually supplementary, okay? How would we set up that equation if they were supplementary instead of congruent? If someone has an idea. So remember that if they were supplementary, we know for a fact that they have to equal 180, right? So if they were, how would we, like, what would we do with those two angles?
What?
Shut up.
Why? What?
So we would add both of those angles together, right? And again, this is saying if these were supplementary, right? We would add them together and set them equal to 180, which just basically means combine our like terms. So 5x um, 5x and 3x, which would be 8x, and then -25 minus 5, which is -30, right? And so that's how we would set up the equation if they were supplementary.